The wailing pierces through the Boeing 747's engine hum like a siren cutting through Seoul traffic. Ji-hoon Park's designer shirt clings to his back with sweat as he mechanically rocks 10-month-old Min Seo, the baby's cries escalating with each passing minute. Flight attendants exchange glances. Passengers shift uncomfortably, some openly glaring at the 35-year-old CEO who built Park Dynamics from nothing but now can't silence his own son. "Please, Min Seo," Ji-hoon whispers in Korean, his voice cracking with exhaustion. His wedding ring catches the cabin light as he adjusts his grip. The baby's face is red, tiny fists flailing against his father's expensive suit jacket. A businessman in 3A pointedly puts on noise-canceling headphones. A grandmother in 4C clicks her tongue in disapproval. 8 hours into the Seoul to New York flight, and nothing works. Not the bottle, not the pacifier, not the gentle bouncing that once made his wife laugh. The memory stabs at him. Soo-jin singing lullabies, her hands always knowing exactly what Min Seo needed. But Soo-jin is gone, and Ji-hoon is drowning in his own incompetence at 35,000 feet. "Sir?" The flight attendant's smile is strained. "Perhaps you could try walking the aisles again?" Ji-hoon nods, standing on unsteady legs. He's the man who negotiated billion-won deals, who commanded boardrooms full of executives twice his age. But here, surrounded by strangers' judgment and his son's inconsolable distress, he feels like a fraud wearing someone else's life. That's when a soft voice, speaking perfect English with a slight southern accent, cuts through the chaos. "Excuse me, may I show you something that might help?" Ji-hoon turns to find a woman in her early 30s watching him with calm, assessing eyes. She's beautiful, strikingly so, with rich, dark skin and loose curls that cascade past her shoulders. But it's her expression that stops him. Competent, unhurried, free of the pity or annoyance he's grown accustomed to seeing. "Sometimes," she continues, rising from her seat in 7E, "what looks like rejection is just a cry for help in another language." The baby's screams reach a new crescendo, and Ji-hoon finds himself nodding before his pride can object. Because in this moment, suspended between two continents with a son he can't comfort, he realizes something that terrifies him more than any hostile takeover. He needs help, and this stranger might be the only person willing to offer it. Have you ever been so desperate that you'd trust a stranger with your most precious vulnerability? Some meetings aren't accidents. They're interventions disguised as coincidence. What happens when the help you need comes from the last person you'd expect? Dr. Nia Thompson moves with the quiet confidence of someone who has spent years studying human behavior. She steps into the aisle, her navy blazer unmarked by travel, her movements deliberate and soothing. Min Seo's cries don't diminish, but something in the cabin's energy shifts as she approaches. "I'm Dr. Thompson," she says, extending her hand to Ji-hoon. Her grip is firm, professional. "I'm a developmental psychologist. With your permission, I'd like to try something." Ji-hoon hesitates. In Seoul, accepting help from strangers isn't just unusual. It's almost shameful, especially for a man of his position. The Confucian values embedded in his upbringing whisper warnings about losing face, about appearing weak. But Min Seo's distress overrides his cultural programming. "Please," he says, the word barely audible above his son's wailing. Nia retrieves a silk scarf from her carry-on, soft blue with silver threads, and approaches slowly. "Babies cry on planes for several reasons," she explains, her voice steady and clinical. "Ear pressure, overstimulation, disrupted routine. But sometimes they're responding to their caregiver's stress more than their own discomfort." She doesn't reach for Min Seo immediately. Instead, she addresses Ji-hoon. I need you to take 3 deep breaths with me. Babies are emotional mirrors. They reflect what they feel from us. The request seems absurd, but Ji-hoon finds himself inhaling deeply alongside this stranger. On the 3rd breath, Min-seo's cries soften slightly, as if responding to some invisible signal. Now, Nia says, may I? Ji-hoon transfers his son to her arms with the careful reverence of handing over something infinitely fragile. Nia cradles Min-seo against her chest, then drapes the silk scarf over his head, creating a soft, filtered environment. The fabric muffles the harsh cabin lighting and reduces the overwhelming sensory input that has been bombarding the baby for hours. Noise-reducing technique, she explains quietly to Ji-hoon. Airplane cabins hover around 100 decibels. For a baby, that's like being inside a construction site. Within minutes that feel like a miracle to Ji-hoon, Min-seo's cries diminish to soft whimpers, then to the steady breathing of approaching sleep. The cabin collectively exhales. The businessman in 3A removes his headphones. The grandmother in 4C nods approvingly. Ji-hoon stares in disbelief. How did you... Sometimes it's not about doing more, Nia says, gently swaying with the now peaceful baby. Sometimes it's about understanding what's already being communicated. She looks up at Ji-hoon, and for the first time in months, he doesn't see judgment in a stranger's eyes. He's not crying because he doesn't love you. He's crying because he feels your fear. The words hit Ji-hoon like a physical blow. Fear. Yes, that's exactly what he carries. Terror that he'll fail Min-seo the way he failed Soo-jin, that his son will grow up knowing his father wasn't enough. You know, Nia continues, her voice softer now, I've studied child development for over a decade, but I've never seen a father fight so hard to comfort his child. That dedication doesn't go unnoticed, even by a 10-month-old. Min-seo stirs in her arms, his tiny hand reaching up to grasp the silk scarf. The simple gesture breaks something open in Ji-hoon's chest. Not pain, but something closer to hope. Thank you, he whispers, and means it more than he's meant anything in months. But as Nia prepares to hand Min-seo back to his father, Ji-hoon reaches for his wallet. The gesture is instinctive, programmed by years of solving problems with money, of reducing human kindness to transactions he can control. Please let me... No. Nia's refusal is gentle but firm. Some things can't be bought, Mr. Park. Ji-hoon Park. Mr. Park, what your son needs isn't something money can provide. But if you're serious about learning, I might have a better suggestion. She reaches into her purse and hands him a business card. Dr. Nia Thompson, Developmental Psychology, Columbia University. Guest speaker, Seoul International Parenting Workshop. Next Friday, 2 p.m. I'm in Seoul for a week, consulting on early childhood development programs. Your son responds well to structure and calm energy. You could learn techniques that work specifically for his temperament. Ji-hoon takes the card, running his thumb over the embossed letters. A week ago, the idea of attending a parenting class would have seemed impossible. CEOs of his stature don't publicly admit to needing help. But looking at his peacefully sleeping son in this stranger's arms, his priorities realign completely. I'll be there, he says. As Nia carefully transfers Min-seo back to his father, she adds quietly, and Mr. Park, the fact that you got on this plane alone with him, that you're trying so hard, that tells me everything I need to know about what kind of father you are. The baby settles against Ji-hoon's chest without protest, finally calm. But as the plane continues its journey toward New York, Ji-hoon finds himself thinking not about his business meetings ahead, but about a Friday afternoon workshop and a woman who saw strength where he only saw failure. He doesn't yet realize that accepting her help was the first step toward rebuilding not just his relationship with his son, but with the possibility of love itself. The Grand Hyatt Seoul's presidential suite feels emptier than Ji-hoon's childhood apartment ever did. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcase the glittering Han River, but all Ji-hoon can focus on is the silence. Blissful, terrifying silence from Min-seo's travel crib. For the first time in weeks, his son sleeps soundly, clutching the blue silk scarf that Dr. Thompson had left behind on the plane. Ji-hoon sits at his laptop, her business card propped against his coffee cup. The Seoul International Convention Center's website displays Dr. Thompson's workshop details. Understanding your child's emotional language, evidence-based approaches to infant development. Below her photo, the same calm, intelligent eyes that had seen through his desperation at 35,000 feet, her credentials scroll endlessly. Columbia University, Harvard Medical School, published researcher. His phone buzzes. Daniel Kim, his CFO and closest friend, calling from New York. How'd the meetings go? And please tell me the flight wasn't as bad as you feared. Ji-hoon rubs his temples. The meetings were fine. Closed the Patterson deal. But Daniel... He hesitates, then plunges ahead. Something happened on the plane. He explains about Dr. Thompson, about Min-seo's immediate response to her intervention, about the workshop invitation. Daniel listens without interruption, a skill that made him invaluable during Park Dynamics' early days when Ji-hoon was too proud to admit uncertainty about anything. So you're actually considering going? Daniel's tone is carefully neutral. I have to. You didn't see how she calmed him. It wasn't luck or coincidence. It was knowledge. Real, applicable knowledge that I don't have. Ji-hoon, Daniel's voice gentles. You know the Korean media are watching your every move. A widowed CEO attending parenting classes? They'll spin it as weakness, as proof you can't handle. Handle what? Being a father? The words come out sharper than intended. Maybe they'd be right. Maybe I can't handle it. But I'd rather face their judgment than watch my son cry because I'm too proud to learn. The line goes quiet. Then Daniel sighs. You're right. You know I support whatever you decide. But maybe go quietly? Register under a different name? After hanging up, Ji-hoon stares at the business card again. The idea of hiding, of attending anonymously, sits uncomfortably in his chest. Since Soo-jin's death, he's operated on autopilot, handling the funeral arrangements with the same efficiency he brought to board meetings, accepting condolences with practiced grace, throwing himself into work to avoid the suffocating weight of grief and guilt. But watching Min-seo sleep peacefully, the scarf rising and falling with each breath, Ji-hoon realizes something fundamental has shifted. For 10 months, he's been trying to be the father he thinks he should be. Controlled, self-sufficient, unbreakable. But what if what Min-seo needs is simply the father Ji-hoon actually is? Flawed, learning, and willing to ask for help. He opens his laptop and begins typing an email to the workshop's registration coordinator. In the subject line, he writes, Registration, Ji-hoon Park, Park Dynamics, CEO. No pseudonym. No corporate assistant handling the details. Just a father who finally understands that strength sometimes looks like surrender. The email sends with a soft chime that doesn't wake Min-seo. Outside, Seoul's neon lights paint patterns on the walls. But Ji-hoon's attention is captured by something else entirely. The possibility that Friday afternoon might change everything he thought he knew about being a parent. In the crib, Min-seo stirs slightly, his small hand tightening around the silk scarf. Even in sleep, he holds on to the one thing that brought him peace. Ji-hoon makes a mental note to thank Dr. Thompson for more than just the parenting advice when he sees her again. He doesn't yet know that she left the scarf intentionally, or that she's been thinking about the desperate father and his beautiful son since the plane landed. Some gifts, she learned long ago, aren't meant to be returned. They're meant to be bridges between one moment and the next, between the help you need and the help you're finally ready to accept. The Seoul International Convention Center buzzes with the controlled chaos of professional conference preparation. Dr. Nia Thompson adjusts her presentation slides one final time, her laptop screen reflecting the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Around her, approximately 40 parents settle into their seats. Mostly mothers with designer handbags and perfectly styled hair. A few fathers checking their phones with practiced discretion. She's conducted hundreds of these workshops across 3 continents, but today feels different. Since landing in Seoul 3 days ago, she hasn't been able to stop thinking about the exhausted man on the plane, about the way his son had instantly responded to her intervention. There had been something in Ji-hoon Park's eyes, not just gratitude, but a desperate kind of hope that she recognized from her own mirror during the hardest years of her career. "Good afternoon, everyone," she begins, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Before we discuss evidence-based approaches to child development, I want you to remember something. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. There are only parents who keep trying." A ripple of relieved laughter passes through the audience. In the back row, Nia spots a familiar figure sliding quietly into an empty seat. Ji-hoon Park, wearing a charcoal suit that probably costs more than most people's monthly salary, looking simultaneously out of place and exactly where he belongs. Their eyes meet for a brief moment. He nods almost imperceptibly, and she continues her presentation without missing a beat, though something warm settles in her chest. "Let's start with a scenario," Nia says, advancing to her next slide. "Your 10-month-old has been crying for 3 hours. Nothing you try works. You're exhausted, frustrated, and beginning to doubt every parenting instinct you have. What do you do?" Hands shoot up around the room. The responses are predictable. Try a different bottle, call my mother, check for fever, play classical music. All excellent suggestions, Nia acknowledges. But what if the problem isn't medical or environmental? What if your child is responding to something you can't see but they can feel? She clicks to a slide titled Emotional Contagion in Infants. Babies are remarkable emotional receptors. They don't just hear our words or see our actions. They feel our internal states. A parent's anxiety, grief, or fear becomes their anxiety, grief, and fear. In the back row, Ji-hoon straightens. His pen hovers over his notebook, and Nia can see him processing the information with the focused intensity of someone for whom this isn't theoretical. "This doesn't mean you need to be happy all the time," she continues. "That's neither possible nor healthy. It means you need to be honest with yourself and with your child about what you're feeling, and then actively choose calm over chaos whenever possible." A woman in the third row raises her hand. "But what if you're dealing with loss? What if being calm isn't realistic?" The question hangs in the air. Nia glances again at Ji-hoon, who has gone very still. "Grief is one of the most challenging emotions to navigate as a parent," Nia says carefully. "Children don't need us to hide our pain, but they do need us to process it healthily. They need to know that our sadness isn't about them, and that despite our loss, they are safe and loved." She advances to a new slide, creating stability within change. When a family structure changes, through death, divorce, or other major transitions, children need extra reassurance that their world hasn't become fundamentally unsafe. This often requires the grieving parent to seek support, to acknowledge that healing isn't a solo journey. After the formal presentation ends, parents cluster around Nia with follow-up questions. She answers each thoughtfully, but her peripheral vision tracks Ji-hoon's movements as he waits patiently at the back of the room. When the last participant leaves, he approaches with the same careful dignity she remembers from the airplane. "Dr. Thompson," he says, bowing slightly, a gesture that seems both formal and genuinely respectful. "Thank you for today, and for before. How is Minseo?" she asks. "Better, much better. He's been sleeping through the night since we got back to Seoul. But I realize now that his crying wasn't really about the flight." Nia nods. "You're processing a tremendous loss while trying to be everything to a child who needs you to be emotionally available. That's an impossible standard to maintain alone." Ji-hoon is quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife died during childbirth, 10 months ago. I keep thinking that if I'd been different, stronger, more attentive, more something, maybe she'd still be here. And Minseo feels that guilt every time I hold him." The admission lands between them like a confession. Nia has heard variations of this story countless times in her clinical work, but something about Ji-hoon's careful composure makes her heart ache. "Survivor's guilt is incredibly common," she says gently, "but it's also treatable. Have you considered therapy? Not just for parenting skills, but for processing your loss?" He shakes his head. "In my culture, in my position, seeking mental health support is seen as weakness. The media would what? Report that a loving father is doing everything possible to be emotionally healthy for his son?" Nia's voice carries a note of challenge. "Mr. Park, what matters more? Public perception or Minseo's well-being?" The question hits its mark. Ji-hoon's shoulders straighten. "You're right. Of course you're right. But I don't know where to start. I don't know anyone here who..." He trails off, looking suddenly vulnerable despite his expensive suit and commanding presence. Nia makes a decision that will later feel both inevitable and completely impulsive. "I'm in Seoul for another 5 days," she says. "I have some free time. If you'd like, and only if you're comfortable with it, I could work with you and Minseo privately. Not formal therapy, but practical sessions. Help you develop techniques for managing both his needs and your grief." Ji-hoon's eyes widen. "You would do that? But your schedule, your rates... Some things aren't about money, remember?" Nia smiles. "Besides, I'm curious to see how Minseo is doing. That scarf trick was a diagnostic tool. I'd like to follow up on its effectiveness. It's a professional rationalization for what feels like a deeply personal impulse, but Ji-hoon doesn't question it. "Thank you," he says simply. "When can we start?" As they exchange contact information, Nia realizes she's just committed to something that goes well beyond her usual consulting work. But looking at this man who's trying so hard to be perfect for a son who just needs him to be present, she knows she's made the right choice. Neither of them recognizes it yet, but this is the moment their lives begin to reshape around each other. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through the quiet decision to show up, to help, and to trust that sometimes the best way forward is together. Mrs. Kim arrives at Ji-hoon's Gangnam penthouse unannounced, as has become her habit since Soo-jin's death. Her key turns in the lock with the authority of someone who considers herself still part of the family, despite the complex grief that colors every interaction between her and her late daughter's husband. "Minseo-ya," she calls softly in Korean, her voice immediately brightening as she spots her grandson in his playpen. But her expression shifts when she notices the blue silk scarf tied to the rail. Unfamiliar, clearly expensive, and definitely not something that belonged to Soo-jin. Ji-hoon emerges from his home office, laptop in hand, looking more rested than he has in months. The change is subtle but unmistakable. The deep shadows under his eyes have faded, and there's less tension in his shoulders. "Mrs. Kim," he says, bowing respectfully. "I didn't expect you today." "I came to take Min-seo to the park," she replies in Korean, her tone carefully neutral. "But I see he has new accessories." She nods toward the scarf. Ji-hoon follows her gaze, and something protective flickers across his face. It's a comfort item. It helps him sleep. "From where?" Mrs. Kim's question carries the weight of 10 months' worth of careful observation, of watching her son-in-law navigate single parenthood with a mixture of admiration and concern. Since Soo-jin's death, she's appointed herself as guardian of her daughter's memory and her grandson's well-being, roles that sometimes conflict with Ji-hoon's growing independence. A doctor recommended it, a child development specialist. Mrs. Kim lifts Min-seo from his playpen, and the baby immediately reaches for the scarf. He's clearly attached to it, which only deepens her concern. In her experience, when children form attachments to new objects, it usually means new people have entered their lives. "What kind of doctor?" she asks, settling into the armchair where Soo-jin used to nurse Min-seo. The parallel isn't lost on either of them. Ji-hoon hesitates. He could deflect, change the subject, or give a vague answer. But the past week with Dr. Thompson has taught him something about the value of honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. A developmental psychologist, Dr. Nia Thompson. She helped us on the flight back from New York, and I attended one of her workshops here in Seoul. Mrs. Kim's eyebrows rise. "You attended a workshop? In public?" "Yes." Ji-hoon's voice is steady, but she can hear the defensiveness underneath. "I learned techniques that have helped Min-seo sleep better, eat better, and cry less. I learned that some of his distress was responding to my own grief, and that there are ways to process that healthily. And this Dr. Thompson, she's Korean? She's American, African American." The silence that follows is loaded with generations of cultural complexity. Mrs. Kim has lived through Korea's transformation from isolated nation to global power, has watched her country grapple with questions of identity, tradition, and foreign influence. Her concerns aren't rooted in malice, but in a fierce protectiveness shaped by decades of seeing change as both opportunity and threat. "I see," she says finally. "And how long will she be in Seoul?" "She leaves tomorrow, but she's been working with Min-seo and me this week. Private sessions. She's helped us develop routines that actually work." Mrs. Kim bounces Min-seo gently, and he babbles contentedly, a sound that's become more frequent since Dr. Thompson's interventions began. She can't deny that her grandson seems happier, more settled. But the protective instinct that made her a devoted mother to Soo-jin now flares with concern for the family's future. "Ji-hoona," she says, using the affectionate diminutive that signals she's speaking from love rather than judgment. "Min-seo needs stability, consistency, not people who come and go. I know that. But he also needs a father who understands his developmental needs, who can respond to his emotional cues. Dr. Thompson has taught me things that will help him for the rest of his life. And when she leaves, when this help is no longer available?" The question strikes at Ji-hoon's deepest fear. Over the past week, he's grown accustomed to Dr. Thompson's insights, her calm presence, her ability to see solutions where he sees only problems. The thought of returning to the desperate uncertainty of those first months fills him with panic. "I'll manage," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. Mrs. Kim watches her grandson play with the silk scarf, notices how his tiny fingers trace its edges as if memorizing its texture, Sujin would want you to be happy, she says quietly. But she would also want Min-seo to remember his Korean heritage, to understand where he comes from. He will. That's not going to change. But other things might. The question is gentle but pointed. Ji-hoon meets her eyes directly. Mrs. Kim, I loved your daughter. I love her still. But I can't parent from a place of grief forever. Min-seo deserves better than a father who's afraid to grow, afraid to accept help, afraid to consider that maybe there's room for new people in our lives without dishonoring old ones. The words hang between them like a bridge being built in real time. Mrs. Kim has spent 10 months trying to preserve her daughter's presence in this household. But she's beginning to understand that preservation and stagnation aren't the same thing. This, Dr. Thompson, she says carefully, she makes you happy? Ji-hoon considers the question seriously. She makes me feel capable. Like maybe I can actually be the father Min-seo needs. And yes, when she's around, things feel lighter, more possible. Mrs. Kim nods slowly. She's not ready to embrace the idea of change, but she's wise enough to recognize that her grandson's well-being depends on his father's emotional health. Then perhaps, she says, you should consider asking her to stay longer. The suggestion catches Ji-hoon off guard. Mrs. Kim, not forever, she continues, but long enough to ensure that what you've learned becomes permanent. Long enough to be certain that Min-seo's attachment to that scarf, and to her, won't become another loss in his short life. As if understanding the conversation is about him, Min-seo looks up at his father and grandmother, babbling happily. The silk scarf is clutched in his small fist, but his attention is focused on the two adults who love him most. I'll think about it, Ji-hoon says. But as Mrs. Kim settles in to spend the afternoon with her grandson, he's already reaching for his phone. Dr. Thompson's flight is scheduled for tomorrow evening. Some conversations, he's learning, can't wait for perfect timing or complete certainty. Outside, Seoul's afternoon traffic hums with its usual intensity. But inside the penthouse, something fundamental has shifted. Change is no longer the enemy of memory. It's becoming the pathway to healing, one careful conversation at a time. Dr. Naya Thompson's hotel suite overlooks Namsan Tower, but her attention is fixed on the packet of plane tickets scattered across her coffee table. Tomorrow's flights to New York, connecting to a conference in Boston, then back to her Columbia office where 17 new case studies await review. The life she built with careful precision, the career that earned her international recognition, all of it pulls her back toward familiar routines and predictable challenges. Her phone buzzes with a text from Ji-hoon. Min-seo slept through the night again. Third time this week. Whatever you taught me is working. Thank you isn't enough. She sets the phone aside without responding, though something warm blooms in her chest. In 5 days of private sessions, she's watched a desperate father transform into a confident parent, watched a fussy baby become a content, curious child. It's the kind of breakthrough that reminds her why she chose developmental psychology in the first place. The profound satisfaction of watching families heal. But there's something else. Something that has nothing to do with professional accomplishment, and everything to do with the way Ji-hoon's eyes light up when Min-seo babbles. The way he started to laugh during their sessions. The way he looks at her like she holds answers to questions he's afraid to ask. A soft knock interrupts her thoughts. Room service, probably, though she doesn't remember ordering anything. Instead, she opens the door to find Ji-hoon standing in the hallway. Min-seo sleeping peacefully in his carrier, the blue silk scarf visible beneath the baby's chin. I'm sorry to bother you, he begins, then stops. Actually, that's not true. I'm not sorry. I needed to see you before you leave. Nia steps back, gesturing them inside. Ji-hoon moves with the quiet care of someone who's learned not to wake a sleeping baby, settling into the chair across from her sofa. In the week since their first meeting, he's shed some of the rigid formality that seemed like armor. His tie is loosened, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly mussed from carrying Min-seo. "How did you know which room?" she asks. "I may have used some executive privileges with hotel management," he admits, and there's something almost boyish in his expression. "I have a proposition." Nia raises an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Stay in Seoul. Another month, maybe 2. Let me hire you as a consultant. Not just for Min-seo, but for Park Dynamics. We're launching a family-friendly workplace initiative, and we need expert guidance on child development policies." The offer hangs between them, professionally reasonable and personally loaded. Nia has consulted for corporations before, has helped design policies that support working parents. It's exactly the kind of high-profile project that advances careers and opens doors. "That's very generous," she says carefully. "But I have commitments in New York. Ongoing research, students who depend on... I know. And I know this is presumptuous. But Naya..." He stops, seeming to realize he's used her first name without permission, then continues anyway. "You've changed our lives in 1 week. Min-seo responds to you in ways he's never responded to anyone. And I feel like I'm finally learning how to be his father, instead of just surviving parenthood." Min-seo stirs in his carrier, making soft baby sounds that might become crying or might settle back into sleep. Without thinking, Nia reaches over and adjusts the silk scarf, her fingers brushing Ji-hoon's as he does the same thing simultaneously. The touch is brief, accidental, but it sends awareness shooting through both of them. "It's not about the money," Ji-hoon continues, his voice quieter now. "It's about... do you believe in timing? In the idea that sometimes people enter your life exactly when you need them most?" Nia looks down at Min-seo, who has settled back into peaceful sleep. She thinks about her apartment in New York. Neat, quiet, filled with academic achievements and professional accolades, but empty of the kind of joy she's felt this week. She thinks about the way Ji-hoon has blossomed under her guidance, how his natural warmth has emerged as his confidence grew. What about Mrs. Kim? Your mother-in-law seemed concerned about foreign influence in Min-seo's life. She's protective, but she's not unreasonable. She sees how happy Min-seo is, and she said something today that surprised me. She suggested I ask you to stay longer. She did? She's worried about consistency for Min-seo, about him forming attachments that disappear. And she's right. He's bonded with you. More than that, he's thriving with you. Nia stands and walks to the window, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. She's built her career on helping families from a professional distance, on maintaining boundaries between her expertise and her emotions. But this family has slipped past all her careful defenses. I'd need to arrange sabbatical leave, she says finally. Transfer my current cases, find coverage for my classes. Does that mean you're considering it? Hope threads through Ji-hoon's voice. She turns back to face him. It means I'm terrified of what I'm considering. I don't usually get personally involved with my clients' families. We stopped being just clients 3 days ago, Ji-hoon says quietly. At least, it stopped feeling that way to me. The admission settles between them like a confession. Nia knows he's right. Somewhere between teaching him to read Min-seo's emotional cues and watching him discover his own parenting instincts, professional boundaries have blurred into something much more complicated. If I stay, she says, it has to be clear that Min-seo's well-being comes first, always. Of course, and no media attention. I won't be part of some story about the CEO and his American consultant. Agreed. Ji-hoon pauses. Though I should warn you, Korean media can be persistent. My personal life is unfortunately newsworthy. I'll handle the media if it comes to that. The question is whether you're prepared for the complications this might create. For your business, your social standing, your family relationships. Ji-hoon looks down at his sleeping son, then back at her. A week ago, I was a father who couldn't comfort his own child. Now Min-seo sleeps through the night, laughs during the day, and reaches for me instead of crying when I come home from work. You did that. You taught me how to do that. Whatever complications arise, they're worth it. Min-seo chooses that moment to wake up, blinking sleepily before focusing on Nia with the kind of pure recognition that makes her heart clench. He reaches for her with tiny hands, babbling softly, and she finds herself lifting him from the carrier before she consciously decides to do so. "Hello, sweetheart," she murmurs, and he settles against her shoulder as if he belongs there. "What do you think? Should I stick around for a while longer?" Min-seo's response is to grab a handful of her hair and babble what sounds remarkably like approval. Ji-hoon laughs, a sound that's become more frequent over the past week, and Nia realizes her decision was probably made the moment she opened the hotel room door. 1 month, she says. We'll see how it goes from there. 1 month, Ji-hoon agrees, but his smile suggests he's already planning for much longer. As they begin to discuss logistics, work visas, housing arrangements, Park Dynamics consulting contract, Min-seo falls asleep in Nia's arms, still clutching her hair. Outside, Seoul continues its relentless energy. But inside the hotel room, 3 people who were strangers a week ago begin to plan what might become a future together. Neither adult acknowledges it yet, but they're no longer just talking about child development consulting. They're talking about building something that looks remarkably like a family, one careful decision at a time. The early morning light filters through the windows of Ji-hoon's penthouse, casting gentle shadows across the living room where Nia sits cross-legged on the floor, building block towers for Min-seo to knock down. It's been 3 weeks since she extended her stay, and the apartment has subtly transformed. Baby-proofing corners with colorful foam guards, educational toys organized in accessible baskets, a rocking chair positioned near the window where she often feeds Min-seo his lunch. Ji-hoon watches from the kitchen doorway, coffee cup in hand, marveling at how natural it all looks. Min-seo babbles excitedly each time his small hands send blocks scattering across the hardwood floor, and Nia responds with the kind of patient enthusiasm that Ji-hoon is still learning to emulate. The scene fills him with warmth and something else, a guilt that gnaws at the edges of his contentment. "Again," Min-seo demands in his limited vocabulary, and Nia laughs, reaching for the scattered blocks. "One more tower, then we need to get you ready for your daddy's meeting," she says, glancing up to find Ji-hoon watching them. Their eyes meet, and something passes between them. An awareness that has been building over weeks of shared meals, bedtime routines, and quiet conversations after Min-seo falls asleep. Today's meeting looms over them both. Park Dynamics Board of Directors is reviewing Ji-hoon's proposal for expanded family support services, with Nia scheduled to present the psychological research backing the initiative. It's their first professional collaboration, but it feels weighted with personal significance they haven't yet acknowledged aloud. After breakfast, as they prepare to leave, Ji-hoon stops at the hallway shrine dedicated to Sujin, a small table with her photograph, fresh flowers, and incense that he lights each morning out of habit more than devotion. The ritual has felt increasingly hollow lately, though he can't bring himself to abandon it. Nia notices his hesitation. Over the past weeks, she's observed his morning routine, seen how he approaches his wife's memory with a mixture of reverence and burden. As a psychologist, she recognizes the signs of complicated grief. As a woman growing to care for this family, she feels the weight of loving someone who's still tethered to the past. She was beautiful, Nia says softly, approaching to stand beside him. It's the first time she's directly acknowledged Soo-jin's presence in their lives. Ji-hoon's shoulders tense. She would have been a wonderful mother. She had all the instincts I'm still trying to develop. Tell me about her, Nia requests, settling Min Seo more securely on her hip. The invitation surprises Ji-hoon. In the week since Nia's arrival, they've danced around the subject of his deceased wife, acknowledging her existence without exploring the details, respecting her memory without examining its impact on their developing relationship. She was light, he begins, his voice careful. Always finding reasons to laugh, even during my worst business crises. She'd leave little notes in my briefcase, jokes that made no sense but somehow always improved my day. He pauses, looking at Nia's encouraging expression. She was excited about being a mother. She read every parenting book, attended every class, prepared for Min Seo's arrival with the same thoroughness she brought to everything else. She sounds wonderful, Nia says, and means it. I can see her influence in Min Seo, that curiosity, that quick smile, and in you too. The way you fight so hard to be a good father, that dedication comes from loving her. Ji-hoon stares at the photograph, processing Nia's words. For 10 months, he's carried his wife's death like a weight that grows heavier with time. But Nia's perspective offers something different. The possibility that honoring Soo-jin's memory doesn't require him to remain frozen in grief. Sometimes I feel guilty, he admits quietly, about how much easier things have become since you arrived. Like maybe I should still be struggling, still be lost, as proof that I loved her enough. Min Seo reaches toward the photograph, babbling softly. Nia adjusts her hold so he can see it clearly. Look, Min Seo-ya, she says gently. That's your Aoyama. She loved you very much before you were born. The Korean word for mother flows naturally from her lips, and Ji-hoon realizes she's been learning his language. Not just the basic phrases necessary for Min Seo's care, but the deeper vocabulary of family connection. Healing doesn't dishonor the dead, Nia continues, speaking to both the baby and his father. Growing doesn't mean forgetting. Your son needs to know his mother's love, but he also needs to see that love can continue, can expand, can include new people without diminishing what came before. Ji-hoon looks at Nia holding his son, both of them gazing peacefully at Soo-jin's photograph, and something shifts inside him. Instead of feeling torn between past and present, he suddenly sees them as connected. Soo-jin's love creating the foundation that allows him to accept new love. Her sacrifice giving him the son who brought Nia into their lives. She would have liked you, he says, and the words feel like truth rather than comfort. She would have appreciated how you see solutions instead of problems, how you make everything seem possible. And she would be proud of the father you're becoming, Nia replies. Not despite the help you've accepted, but because of your courage to grow for Min Seo's sake. They stand there for a moment longer, the three of them creating a new kind of family portrait, with Soo-jin's memory as witness rather than obstacle. When Ji-hoon lights the incense, it feels like blessing rather than burden. Gratitude for what was and hope for what might be. Min Seo claps his hands suddenly, breaking the reverent mood with pure baby joy. Both adults laugh, and the sound seems to settle something fundamental in the apartment's atmosphere. Ready for your presentation? Ji-hoon asks as they gather their materials for the board meeting. Ready, Nia confirms, though she's thinking less about charts and research data and more about the man beside her who's finally learning that love isn't a limited resource. It multiplies when shared, includes without erasing, and honors the past by building toward the future. As they leave the apartment together, Ji-hoon carries Min-seo's diaper bag, while Nia manages the presentation materials and the baby himself. To an observer, they might look like any modern family heading out for the day. But there's something more complex and precious, a family choosing to become itself, one honest conversation at a time, with the blessing of a woman who loved them enough to make their meeting possible. The boardroom at Park Dynamics towers over Seoul's financial district, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Han River, while Naya delivers her presentation on family-friendly workplace policies. The 12 board members listen with varying degrees of interest as she explains the correlation between employee satisfaction and child development support, her charts and graphs building a compelling case for corporate investment in parental well-being. Ji-hoon watches from his position at the head of the conference table, noting how naturally Nia commands the room. She fields questions with the same calm competence he witnessed on the airplane, knowledgeable without being condescending, passionate without losing professional composure. Several board members lean forward when she discusses the economic benefits of reduced employee turnover, and he can see the proposal gaining traction with each slide. "Dr. Thompson," asked Director Lee, a stern woman in her 60s who helped build Park Dynamics from its early days. "These policies seem quite progressive for a Korean corporation. How do you suggest we implement such changes without disrupting our established culture?" "Cultural evolution doesn't require cultural abandonment," Nia responds smoothly. "Korea has always valued family structure and filial responsibility. What I'm proposing simply extends that value system into the modern workplace, supporting parents so they can be more effective both at home and in their careers." Director Kim nods approvingly. "And the cost analysis shows positive returns within 18 months? Conservative estimates suggest 16 months, but yes. Companies that support working parents see measurable improvements in productivity, creativity, and employee loyalty. The investment pays for itself, and then generates ongoing benefits." As the presentation concludes to respectful applause, Ji-hoon feels a surge of pride that has nothing to do with business success. Watching Nia advocate for families with such expertise and passion, he realizes she's not just helping his company. She's fighting for values they share, building a framework that could support thousands of parents like himself. "Excellent work, Dr. Thompson," he says as the board members file out, most voicing preliminary approval for the initiative. "I think we have strong support for moving forward." "They're progressive thinkers," Naya replies, packing her materials. "More receptive than I expected, honestly. This could become a model for other Korean corporations." Their professional satisfaction is interrupted by Ji-hoon's assistant, Ms. Park, appearing in the doorway with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Mr. Park," she says in Korean, then switches to English with a glance at Nia. "There's been a situation. The media. Someone leaked information about Dr. Thompson's consulting work here, and about her relationship with your family." Ji-hoon's stomach drops. "What kind of information?" Ms. Park hands him a tablet displaying the homepage of Seoul's most notorious celebrity gossip website. The headline reads, "Park Dynamics, CEO's secret American lover, widowed chaebol heir, hides interracial romance behind professional consulting." Below it, a series of photographs show Ji-hoon and Nia entering his building together, Nia carrying Min-seo, the three of them looking unmistakably like a family unit. "How did they get these photos?" Nia asks, leaning closer to examine the images. Her voice is steady, but Ji-hoon can see tension gathering around her eyes. "Building security cameras, probably," Ji-hoon says grimly. "Or telephoto lenses from neighboring buildings. Korean paparazzi are resourceful." He scrolls through the article, his expression darkening with each paragraph. "They're speculating about marriage, about Min Seo calling you mother, about whether you're pregnant. The invasion feels visceral, intimate moments twisted into public entertainment." Nia sees herself described as the mysterious American psychologist who has captured both father and son, her professional credentials reduced to exotic novelty, her relationship with Min Seo portrayed as calculated manipulation rather than genuine care. "Is there more?" she asks quietly. Ms. Park nods reluctantly. 3 other publications have picked up the story, and there are photographers outside the building now, waiting for statements. Ji-hoon closes the tablet with controlled force. In the week since Nia's arrival, he's grown comfortable with their developing intimacy, allowing himself to hope for a future that includes her permanently. But now, seeing their private moments dissected for public consumption, he's reminded of the costs that come with his public profile. "I'm sorry," he says to Nia. "I should have anticipated this. Should have been more careful about public appearances." "Don't apologize for living your life," Nia replies firmly. "But we need to decide how to handle this. Together." Her use of "we" sends warmth through his chest, despite the circumstances. She's not running, not retreating into professional distance despite the unwanted scrutiny. Instead, she's standing beside him, ready to face whatever complications arise from their choice to build a family together. "The board will be watching," Ji-hoon says, thinking aloud. "Some members are conservative, traditional. This kind of attention could affect their support for both the family initiative and my leadership. Then we control the narrative," Nia says decisively. "We tell our own story before others tell it for us. Professional truth, personal truth, and complete transparency about Min Seo's well-being." Ms. Park clears her throat delicately. "Sir, your mother-in-law is also calling. She's concerned about the articles." The reminder of Mrs. Kim adds another layer of complexity. Ji-hoon can imagine her shock at seeing their private family life splashed across gossip websites, can picture her calculating the potential impact on Min Seo's reputation and future social standing. "We go home," he decides. "Face Mrs. Kim first, then decide how to address the media. Min Seo's needs come before public relations." As they prepare to leave the office, Ji-hoon's phone buzzes with a text from Daniel in New York. "Saw the Korean news alerts. You okay? This looks serious." The message reminds him that this story won't stay contained to Seoul. His business relationships, international reputation, and Min Seo's future privacy are all now at stake. But looking at Nia, who's checking her own phone with calm determination, he feels something he hasn't experienced since Soo-jin's death. The certainty that he's not facing this crisis alone. "Ready?" she asks, shouldering her purse and straightening her blazer as if preparing for battle. "Ready," he confirms, though they both know they're about to discover whether their developing relationship can withstand the harsh glare of public scrutiny. As they exit the boardroom together, their footsteps echoing in the marble hallway, neither realizes that this crisis will ultimately force them to define what they mean to each other, not just privately, but publicly, permanently, and in front of everyone who matters most to them. The elevator to Ji-hoon's penthouse moves with agonizing slowness, each floor marked by the weight of silence between him and Nia. Min Seo babbles contentedly in her arms, oblivious to the storm gathering around his small family. When the doors finally open, they're greeted by Mrs. Kim sitting stiffly in the living room, her face a mask of controlled concern as she scrolls through multiple news websites on her tablet. Mrs. Kim, Ji-hoon begins in Korean, but she holds up her hand to silence him. Sit down, both of you. Her tone carries the authority of someone who has navigated Korean society's complex social hierarchies for decades. When they comply, settling onto the sofa with Min Seo between them, she turns the tablet screen toward them. Do you understand what this means? The articles have multiplied in the hour since they left the office. Conservative bloggers question Ji-hoon's judgment as a father and CEO. Social media users debate whether interracial relationships are appropriate for high-profile Korean figures. Business analysts speculate about potential impacts on Park Dynamics' stock price and international partnerships. Mrs. Kim, Nia says carefully, I know this is overwhelming, but… Dr. Thompson, Mrs. Kim interrupts, you are a brilliant woman, but you are also American, and you may not fully understand what you're walking into. She gestures toward the tablet. This is not simply gossip. This is a challenge to everything my family represents in Korean society. Ji-hoon feels the familiar weight of cultural expectation pressing down on him. Since taking over his father's company at 30, he's carried the responsibility of representing not just Park Dynamics, but a particular vision of Korean success. Traditional values adapted for global business, family honor maintained through professional achievement. What are you saying? He asks, though he suspects he already knows. Mrs. Kim's expression softens slightly as she looks at her grandson, who has started playing with Naya's necklace. I'm saying that love, if that's what this is, sometimes requires sacrifice. And you need to decide what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not. The words land like physical blows. Naya straightens, understanding the implicit ultimatum, while Ji-hoon struggles with the collision between his heart and his heritage. Min Seo is thriving, Nia says quietly. Developmentally, emotionally, socially, he's more secure now than when I first met him. Whatever our personal relationship becomes, his well-being should be the primary consideration. Of course, Mrs. Kim acknowledges, but Min Seo will grow up in Korean society. He will attend Korean schools, work in Korean businesses, potentially marry into Korean families. His reputation matters as much as his happiness. The argument is circular and ancient. Individual desires versus collective expectations. Personal fulfillment versus social responsibility. Ji-hoon has lived with this tension his entire life, but it's never felt as urgent as it does now, with Min Seo gurgling happily between the two women who love him most. His phone buzzes insistently, Daniel calling from New York. Take it, Nia says. We should know what the international response looks like. Ji-hoon answers on speaker. Daniel. Ji-hoon, I've been fielding calls all morning. The Patterson deal is secure, but other potential partners are asking questions. Nothing hostile, but cautious. They want to understand your family situation before committing to long-term contracts. The business implications crystallize around them. Park Dynamics employs 1,500 people across 3 countries. Ji-hoon's personal choices ripple outward, affecting not just his own family, but hundreds of others who depend on the company's continued success. What's your recommendation? Ji-hoon asks, though his voice sounds hollow to his own ears. Honestly, clear, decisive action. Either embrace this relationship publicly and weather the short-term turbulence, or end it cleanly before it damages the company long-term. The worst thing you can do is appear uncertain or defensive. After hanging up, the 3 adults sit in heavy silence. Min Seo, sensing the tension, begins to fuss, reaching first for Nia, then for his father, unsure which comfort source is more reliable. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built, Nia says finally. Her voice is steady, but Ji-hoon can see the pain she's trying to hide. Your company, your family's reputation, Min-seo's future social standing, those things matter. They should matter more than whatever is developing between us. No. The word escapes before Ji-hoon can censor it. No, that's not the calculation we should be making. Mrs. Kim raises an eyebrow. Then what calculation should we be making? Ji-hoon looks at his son, who has settled against Nia's shoulder with the complete trust that only children possess. For 10 months after Soo-jin's death, Min-seo cried constantly, slept poorly, and seemed perpetually distressed. In the weeks since Nia's arrival, he's become a different child, curious, affectionate, secure. We should be asking what gives Min-seo the best chance at a happy, healthy life, Ji-hoon says slowly. Not what preserves tradition or protects business interests, but what actually serves my son's well-being. And your answer? Mrs. Kim prompts. Ji-hoon meets Nia's eyes. My answer is that he needs parents who love him and each other, who model healthy relationships and emotional honesty. He needs adults in his life who choose growth over fear, who face challenges together instead of running from them. Even if it costs you everything else? Mrs. Kim asks. Mrs. Kim, I've already lost everything once. When Soo-jin died, I thought my world ended. But Nia taught me something important. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It multiplies. Honoring Soo-jin's memory doesn't require me to remain frozen in grief. He stands, gathering Min-seo from Nia's arms and holding him close. If Korean society can't accept that a widowed father might find love again, that an international family might be stronger than a traditional one, then maybe it's time to challenge those assumptions. The declaration hangs in the air like a bridge being built in real time. Mrs. Kim studies her son-in-law's face, seeing determination where months ago there was only desperate grief. Nia watches both of them, understanding that this moment will define not just their relationship, but the kind of family they might become. The media will be relentless, Mrs. Kim warns, though her tone has shifted from opposition to concern. Let them, Ji-hoon replies. We'll tell our own story. Truthfully, completely, and without apology. As if sensing the emotional weight of the moment, Min-seo looks up at his father and babbles softly, his small hand reaching toward Nia. The gesture is simple but profound. A child's instinctive understanding that love comes in many forms, and that family is defined by choice as much as blood. All right, Mrs. Kim says finally. If you're determined to fight this battle, then we fight it together, as a family. The words feel like a benediction, a bridge between old values and new possibilities. Outside, Seoul continues its relentless pace, but inside the penthouse, 3 adults and 1 baby begin planning how to build a future that honors both tradition and transformation, one courageous choice at a time. The crisis escalates over the weekend. What began as gossip website speculation explodes across mainstream media when a conservative politician uses Ji-hoon's relationship as an example of Western influences undermining Korean family values during a televised debate. By Sunday evening, Wanger Park Dynamics CEO trends on social media with a mixture of support and condemnation that splits along generational and political lines. Inside the penthouse, the siege mentality grows more intense. Security guards stationed in the lobby redirect persistent reporters, while Ji-hoon's legal team works to limit unauthorized photography and protect Min-seo's privacy. But the stress seeps into everything. Tense phone calls from board members, carefully worded statements from the company's PR department, and most troubling of all, Min-seo's gradual retreat into the fussiness that characterized his early months. "He's responding to our anxiety," Nia observes Monday morning, watching Ji-hoon pace the living room while balancing a cranky Min-seo. The baby, who has been sleeping through the night for weeks now, wakes every few hours, crying inconsolably until exhausted parents take turns walking him through darkened hallways. "I know," Ji-hoon says, his voice raw from sleep deprivation. "But I don't know how to separate my own stress from his needs. Everything feels connected: his well-being, the company's future, our relationship, the media attention. I can't compartmentalize anymore." The admission reveals how far he's come from the controlled CEO who never showed weakness. But it also signals the depth of pressure they're all under. Nia watches him struggle with the same desperate helplessness she witnessed on the airplane, and her heart breaks for both father and son. Mrs. Kim arrives Tuesday afternoon with updates from her social circles, a mixture of support and concern that reflects the broader cultural divide. "My book club is split," she reports with dry humor. "The younger women think you're brave for choosing love over convention. The older women worry about Min-seo's future marriage prospects." "He's 10 months old," Nia says with exasperation. "In Korean society, reputation is built over generations," Mrs. Kim replies. "What we do now affects him for decades to come." That evening, as Ji-hoon attempts to feed Min-seo dinner, the baby refuses his usual foods and pushes away the sippy cup he normally drains. His appetite has dwindled along with his smiles, and the pediatrician's reassurances about stress-related regression do little to ease anyone's worry. "Maybe I should go back to New York," Nia says quietly, as they clean up the untouched meal. "Remove myself as a variable until this settles down." "No." Ji-hoon's response is immediate and firm. "That's exactly what the critics want. Proof that external pressure can break us apart. If we run now, we validate every argument about our relationship being unstable or inappropriate. But look at him." Nia gestures toward Min-seo, who sits listlessly in his high chair, none of his usual curiosity or energy evident. "Our stress is making him sick. Whatever statement we're trying to make about love and family, it's not worth his emotional health." The observation forces them both to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their fight for the right to be together is being waged at Min-seo's expense. The baby who brought them together is now bearing the cost of their refusal to surrender to social pressure. Wednesday morning brings the worst news yet. Director Lee calls an emergency board meeting to discuss leadership stability in light of the ongoing media coverage. 2 major clients have delayed contract renewals pending resolution of the current situation. Park Dynamics' stock price has dropped 12% in 4 days. "They want me to choose," Ji-hoon tells Nia after the call. "The company or you, Min-seo's future financial security or his current emotional well-being, Korean tradition or international love. Those aren't real choices," Nia replies, but her voice lacks conviction. She's watched Ji-hoon build Park Dynamics from his father's smaller company, seen how much pride he takes in employing hundreds of people, providing for families across Seoul. The idea that their relationship could destroy his life's work fills her with guilt that competes with her growing love for both him and Min-seo. That night, Min-seo develops a low fever. Not dangerous, but enough to send both adults into protective overdrive. They take shifts monitoring his temperature, offering fluids, and trying unsuccessfully to comfort his restless sleep. By Thursday morning, all 3 are exhausted, stressed, and beginning to question whether their fight is sustainable. "I have an idea," Mrs. Kim says when she arrives to find them in crisis mode. "But you won't like it." "Tell us," Ji-hoon says wearily. "Take Min-seo away from Seoul. Go somewhere private where he can recover from this stress, where you two can figure out your future without public scrutiny. Let me handle the media here. Redirect their attention. Buy you time to make decisions based on love rather than pressure. The suggestion feels like retreat, but it also feels like wisdom. Min-seo needs stability to heal, and neither parent can provide that while under siege in the city that raised them both. Where would we go? Nia asks. I have a family house in Jeju Island, Ji-hoon says slowly. Private, isolated, peaceful. Min-seo could recover there, away from photographers and speculation. And you could decide, Mrs. Kim adds meaningfully, whether what you're building together is strong enough to weather what comes next, whether love is worth the cost, or whether some sacrifices are too great to ask. The proposal hangs between them like a lifeline and a test. Escape feels like giving up, but staying feels like sacrificing Min-seo's well-being for the sake of proving a point. As they look at their feverish, unhappy baby, the choice becomes clear. Sometimes the most courageous thing parents can do is temporarily retreat in order to return stronger. How soon can we leave? Ji-hoon asks. Tonight, if you're ready, Mrs. Kim replies. I'll make the arrangements. You pack for a family that needs time to remember who they are when the world isn't watching. As they begin preparing for their escape to Jeju Island, none of them realizes that this retreat will become the foundation for everything that follows. The space where fear transforms into clarity, where individual needs align with collective well-being, and where a family learns to choose itself above all other considerations. The Jeju Island house sits perched on volcanic cliffs overlooking the East China Sea. Its traditional Korean architecture softened by modern amenities and surrounded by camellia groves that provide natural privacy. Ji-hoon purchased it 3 years ago as a retreat from Seoul's intensity, but this is the first time he's brought anyone here, besides occasional business associates. Now, watching Nia explore the clean lines and warm wood surfaces while Min-seo naps peacefully in the travel crib, the space feels transformed into something approaching sanctuary. The change in Min-seo is almost immediate. Away from the oppressive energy of the besieged penthouse, his fever breaks on the second day. His appetite returns gradually, and most importantly, his smiles reappear when he discovers the house's garden courtyard, filled with safe spaces to explore. He's a different child here, Nia observes on their 4th morning, watching Min-seo babble delightedly at a butterfly that has landed on his hand. Curious again, engaged, trusting. We all are, Ji-hoon replies, and it's true. Without the constant pressure of media attention and social expectations, he's rediscovered parts of himself that disappeared after Soo-jin's death. His capacity for spontaneous laughter, his appreciation for simple moments, his ability to be present rather than constantly anticipating the next crisis. But even in paradise, reality intrudes. Mrs. Kim calls daily with updates from Seoul. The media attention has intensified rather than diminished, with their absence spawning speculation about secret marriages, unexpected pregnancies, and business scandals. Conservative groups have organized protests outside Park Dynamics headquarters, while progressive activists counter-protest in support of modern Korean families. The board meeting is scheduled for next week, she reports during Tuesday's call. They want a definitive statement about your intentions, personal and professional. Director Lee has been very clear that continued uncertainty is unacceptable for corporate stability. After hanging up, Ji-hoon and Nia walk along the cliff path in contemplative silence. Min-seo sleeps strapped to Ji-hoon's chest, lulled by the ocean breeze and his father's steady movement. The peace is profound, but it's also temporary, a borrowed moment before decisions that will reshape all their futures. I've been thinking, Nia says finally. about something my mentor used to tell her graduate students. She said that love without courage is just wishful thinking, but courage without wisdom is just recklessness. And which are we? Ji-hoon asks. I'm not sure yet, but I know that hiding here indefinitely isn't the answer. Min-seo deserves parents who face their challenges directly, who model resilience rather than retreat. That evening, after Min-seo's bedtime routine, they sit on the house's traditional wooden porch drinking tea and watching stars emerge over the ocean. The conversation they've been avoiding finally begins without preamble or preparation. If we do this, Ji-hoon says quietly, if we decide to build a life together publicly, permanently, what does that actually look like? Not the romantic version, but the practical reality. Nia considers the question seriously. It means I give up my position at Columbia, relocate to Seoul permanently, learn Korean fluently enough to navigate your business and social world. It means accepting that Min-seo will grow up with mixed cultural expectations and probably some social challenges. It means I accept that some business relationships will never recover, that certain sectors of Korean society will always view our family with skepticism or hostility, Ji-hoon continues. It means raising Min-seo to be proud of his unconventional family, while also preparing him for the criticism that comes with it. They're quiet for several minutes, each cataloging the costs and benefits of their potential future. The ocean provides a steady soundtrack, waves against volcanic rock, as constant and patient as the love that brought them to this moment of decision. There's something else to consider, Nia says eventually. My work in developmental psychology. What if we used this situation to actually advance understanding of international families, multicultural child development, modern parenting approaches? Instead of just surviving the criticism, what if we challenged it with evidence and advocacy? The suggestion sparks something in Ji-hoon's entrepreneurial mind. A research foundation? Corporate partnerships focused on family support services? Using our platform to normalize diverse family structures rather than just defending our own? Exactly. Turn the scrutiny into opportunity, the personal into the political. If we're going to face judgment anyway, we might as well use that attention to help other families facing similar challenges. The vision that emerges over the following hours is ambitious and risky. A public partnership that leverages both Ji-hoon's business influence and Nia's academic expertise to advocate for progressive family policies, multicultural acceptance, and evidence-based parenting support. It's bigger than their individual relationship, more meaningful than corporate reputation management, and potentially more impactful than anything either could achieve alone. It won't be easy, Ji-hoon warns. Korean society changes slowly, and there will be setbacks, criticism, political opposition. Nothing worthwhile is easy, Nia replies. But look at him. She gestures toward the house where Min-seo sleeps peacefully. He's already thriving in a multicultural environment, already benefiting from diverse perspectives and approaches. If we can provide that for one child, imagine what we could offer other families. The decision crystallizes around them like morning dew, inevitable, natural, and surprisingly peaceful. They're not just choosing to be together. They're choosing to use their connection as a force for positive change, to transform personal love into social advocacy. So we go back to Seoul, Ji-hoon says. Together, publicly, permanently. Together, Nia agrees, ready to fight for more than just our own happiness. As they begin planning their return, press conferences to schedule, foundation documents to draft, board presentations to prepare, Min-seo stirs in his sleep, unconsciously reaching for the silk scarf that has become his security blanket. Even in dreams, he seems to understand that his family is choosing courage over comfort, growth over safety, and love over everything else that might seem more important, but ultimately matters less. The stars over Jeju Island bear witness to promises being made and futures being written, one brave choice at a time. The press conference takes place in Park Dynamics' main auditorium, designed to hold 200 people but packed with nearly 300 journalists, photographers, and curious onlookers. Ji-hoon sits at a table draped with corporate colors. Nia beside him holding a surprisingly calm Min-seo, who seems fascinated by the camera flashes and crowd noise. Mrs. Kim watches from the front row, her expression carefully neutral, but her posture protective. Ladies and gentlemen, Ji-hoon begins in Korean, then switches to English for Nia's benefit and the international media present. Thank you for coming today. Dr. Thompson and I want to address the recent speculation about our relationship and our family's future. He's spent the morning memorizing this opening, but now, looking out at the sea of expectant faces, the prepared remarks feel inadequate. Instead, he finds himself speaking from the heart, letting honesty guide his words rather than public relations strategy. 10 months ago, I lost my wife during childbirth. I became a single father while grieving the loss of my partner, trying to run a major corporation while learning to comfort a baby who cried constantly because he could feel my pain. His voice catches slightly, but he continues. I thought strength meant handling everything alone, that asking for help was weakness, that accepting support diminished my love for my deceased wife. The audience leans forward, drawn by his vulnerability. Min-seo babbles softly, reaching for the microphone, and gentle laughter ripples through the room. Dr. Nia Thompson entered our lives during our darkest moment, on an airplane where my son's cries disturbed everyone, and my desperation was visible to strangers. She offered help without judgment, expertise without condescension, and over time, love without conditions. He turns to look at Nia, who nods encouragingly. What she gave us wasn't just parenting techniques or professional consultation. She gave us the understanding that families come in many forms, that love multiplies rather than diminishes when shared, and that honoring the past doesn't require remaining frozen in grief. A reporter calls out in Korean, "Are you saying that your relationship with Dr. Thompson is romantic as well as professional?" "I'm saying," Ji-hoon replies steadily, "that Dr. Thompson and I are committed to building a family together. We love each other, we love Min-seo, and we believe our international partnership can benefit not just our own child, but families throughout Korea who are navigating similar challenges." Nia adjusts Min-seo on her lap and leans toward her microphone. "I want to address concerns about cultural compatibility and Min-seo's Korean identity. Love doesn't erase heritage, it enriches it. My role in this family isn't to replace Korean traditions, but to add global perspectives that will help Min-seo navigate an increasingly international world." "What about the criticism that interracial relationships threaten Korean family values?" another reporter asks. "Korean family values emphasize respect, dedication, and sacrifice for the well-being of children," Nia responds. "Those are exactly the principles guiding our relationship. We're not threatening Korean culture. We're expanding its definition to include families that bridge different backgrounds while maintaining core values of love and commitment." Director Lee's voice cuts through the murmur. "Mr. Park, what assurance can you give that this personal situation won't continue to disrupt Park Dynamics' business operations?" Ji-hoon straightens, shifting into his executive persona while maintaining the personal openness he's shown throughout the conference. "Director Lee, effective leadership requires authenticity, emotional intelligence, and the ability to build bridges across different perspectives. My relationship with Dr. Thompson demonstrates all three qualities. Rather than disrupting our business, It positions us to better serve international markets and diverse clients. Additionally, he continues, Dr. Thompson and I are announcing the establishment of the Modern Family Research Foundation, a joint initiative that will partner with corporations, academic institutions, and government agencies to develop evidence-based policies supporting working parents, multicultural families, and child development. Park Dynamics will be the first major Korean corporation to implement these progressive policies. The announcement generates excited chatter among business reporters. Mrs. Kim nods approvingly from the front row. This is the kind of strategic thinking that built Park Dynamics into an industry leader, personal conviction aligned with business innovation. A younger journalist raises her hand. Dr. Thompson, what message do you have for other international women considering relationships with Korean men? I'd say that love requires courage, patience, and mutual respect. Naya replies. Cultural differences can be challenging, but they can also be incredibly enriching. The key is approaching those differences with curiosity rather than judgment, with commitment to understanding rather than changing each other. Min-seo chooses that moment to babble loudly, as if offering his own commentary. The sound breaks the tension, and genuine laughter fills the auditorium. Ji-hoon reaches over to stroke his son's cheek, and the gesture, intimate, natural, paternal, is captured by dozens of cameras. What role will Min-seo's biological mother's memory play in your new family structure? The question comes from an older reporter, and the room grows quiet with respectful attention. Ji-hoon and Nia exchange glances. This is the question they've prepared for most carefully, knowing that their answer will define how Korean society views their relationship's legitimacy. Soo-jin will always be Min-seo's first mother, Ji-hoon says quietly. Her love created him. Her sacrifice gave him life, and her memory will be honored throughout his childhood and beyond. Nia isn't replacing Soo-jin. She's adding to the love that surrounds our son, ensuring he grows up knowing that families can expand without erasing what came before. Love isn't a limited resource, Nia adds. Min-seo can love his biological mother's memory and also bond with me as a present parental figure. Children are capable of holding multiple attachments, multiple identities, multiple sources of love. Our goal is to give him all of that richness, rather than forcing him to choose between past and present. The conference continues for another 30 minutes, with questions about business implications, cultural integration, wedding plans, and future children. Through it all, Min-seo remains remarkably calm, as if sensing that this public declaration secures his family's future in ways his baby mind can't understand, but his heart can feel. As the event concludes, Ji-hoon makes one final statement. Dr. Thompson, Min-seo, and I ask for your respect and privacy as we continue building our family. We're committed to transparency about our professional initiatives, but our personal moments belong to us. Thank you for your understanding. The drive back to the penthouse is quiet, all three adults processing what they've just experienced. Mrs. Kim rides with them, occasionally glancing at Min-seo, who has fallen asleep clutching his silk scarf, the same piece of fabric that facilitated his first peaceful moments with Nia weeks ago. How do you think it went? Nia asks finally. Better than I expected, Mrs. Kim replies before Ji-hoon can answer. You were honest without being defensive, confident without being arrogant. And Min-seo was perfect. He reminded everyone that this is ultimately about a child's well-being, not adult politics. The real test comes in the next few weeks, Ji-hoon adds. Board reactions, client responses, social media feedback. But I think we've established the narrative we want. Love as strength, diversity as asset, family as choice rather than just biology. That evening, after Min-seo's bedtime routine, The three adults sit in the living room where this journey began weeks ago, when Mrs. Kim first questioned Nia's presence in their lives. Now, watching her grandson sleep peacefully while his chosen parents plan their future together, she feels something she hasn't experienced since Soo-jin's death. Hope that this family's story will have a happy ending. So, she says with the hint of a smile, "When do I start planning the wedding?" The question catches both younger adults off guard, then dissolves them into laughter that feels like release, like celebration, like the sound of a family finally sure of itself. Outside, Seoul's neon lights paint the night with artificial brightness, but inside the penthouse, 3 adults and 1 sleeping baby glow with something much more authentic: the warmth of choosing each other deliberately, publicly, and permanently. 1 year later, the Boeing 777's cabin hums with familiar efficiency as it cruises toward New York. But this time, the Park family occupies first-class seats and travels with none of the desperation that marked their first meeting. Min Seo, now 22 months old and walking confidently, explores the generous space around their pod, while Ji-hoon and Nia take turns redirecting his curiosity away from other passengers' belongings. "Remember when he used to cry for 8 straight hours on flights?" Nia asks, watching her stepson demonstrate his newfound independence by attempting to climb into the seat across the aisle. "I remember thinking I was the worst father in the world," Ji-hoon replies, lifting Min Seo easily and settling him back into his own space. "I remember a stranger offering help that changed everything." The silk scarf that started it all is now one of many comfort items in Min Seo's travel bag, but it still holds special significance. During difficult moments, he reaches for its familiar texture, and both parents understand that some objects carry emotional weight far beyond their practical function. Their destination today is Columbia University, where Nia will deliver a keynote address on international family structures and global society to an audience of psychologists, sociologists, and policymakers. The invitation represents a full-circle moment, returning to her academic home not as someone who left to pursue personal relationships, but as someone whose personal experience has enhanced her professional expertise. The Modern Family Research Foundation, launched 6 months ago with Park Dynamics as its flagship corporate partner, has already influenced policy discussions in 3 countries and published preliminary research on multicultural child development that challenges traditional assumptions about family structure and identity formation. "Are you nervous about the presentation?" Ji-hoon asks, noting how Nia reviews her notes with the same focused intensity she brought to their first workshop in Seoul. "Not about the presentation," she replies, "but about introducing Min Seo to my American colleagues, my mentor, my world from before. It feels like 2 different lives coming together." Min Seo chooses that moment to babble a string of words that mix Korean and English seamlessly, a linguistic pattern that delights his parents and serves as living proof of his multicultural adaptability. At nearly 2 years old, he switches between languages instinctively, responds to cultural cues from both traditions, and seems completely comfortable with his internationally complicated identity. The past year has brought challenges that tested their public commitment to each other. Conservative media outlets still occasionally criticize their relationship, and some business associates remain coolly professional rather than warmly supportive. But the foundation's success, Park Dynamics' continued growth, and most importantly, Min Seo's obvious happiness have gradually shifted public opinion from skeptical curiosity to grudging respect. Mrs. Kim, who initially worried about foreign influence disrupting family traditions, has become their strongest advocate. She's learned basic English to communicate more directly with Nia, has enthusiastically embraced her role as multicultural grandmother, and frequently represents the family at social events when the younger adults are traveling for business. She sent photos of Min Seo to half of Seoul, Ji-hoon says, showing Nia his phone where messages from his mother-in-law document their grandson's latest achievements. I think she's more proud of his bilingual development than we are. She's building his reputation the same way she built yours, Nia observes, making sure Korean society sees him as an asset, not an anomaly. The plane begins its descent toward JFK Airport, and Min Seo presses his face against the window, fascinated by the approaching lights of New York City. His parents watch him with the kind of relaxed attention that comes from confidence in their family's stability. No longer crisis management, but simple enjoyment of their child's wonder. "What do you think Soo-jin would say about all this?" Nia asks quietly. It's a question she poses occasionally, not from insecurity but from genuine curiosity about the woman whose love created the foundation for their current happiness. Ji-hoon considers seriously, as he always does when her name arises. I think she'd be amazed by how much Min Seo has grown, how confident and curious he's become. And I think she'd be grateful that he's surrounded by so much love. Yours, mine, Mrs. Kim's, the extended family we've built through the foundation. I think she'd approve of the research we're doing, Nia adds. Using our platform to help other families navigate similar challenges, normalizing diversity, supporting parents who don't fit traditional models. Min Seo turns from the window to look at his parents, reaching first for Ji-hoon's hand, then for Nia's, creating a small circle of connection that has become their family's signature gesture. In airports, restaurants, and foundation events, observers often notice how naturally the three of them gravitate toward each other, how seamlessly they function as a unit. The landing is smooth, and Min Seo handles the ear pressure with the veteran traveler's ease of a child who has crossed oceans multiple times before his second birthday. As they gather their belongings and prepare to disembark, Nia realizes this trip represents something significant, not just a professional presentation, but a homecoming that includes her chosen family, proof that love and career can enhance rather than compete with each other. "Ready?" Ji-hoon asks, lifting Min Seo while Nia shoulders the diaper bag they've learned to pack with military precision. "Ready," she confirms, though she's thinking less about the lecture hall that awaits them and more about the journey that brought them here, from desperate strangers on a plane to confident partners building something meaningful together. As they walk through the jet bridge toward customs and immigration, Min Seo babbles excitedly about the adventure ahead. His words blend languages and cultures with the unconscious fluency of someone who belongs everywhere, because he's loved unconditionally. Behind them, the aircraft that carried them across continents prepares for its next flight, its cabin soon to be filled with other families, other stories, other moments when strangers become essential to each other's lives. In the immigration line, Ji-hoon holds their passports, his Korean, hers American, Min Seo's dual citizenship documenting his right to belong in multiple worlds simultaneously. The documents tell their practical story, but they carry a deeper narrative about choosing love over convention, growth over safety, and each other over everything that seemed more important until they learned what family actually means. 3 years after that first desperate flight, they're no longer defined by crisis or need. They're simply a family, complex, international, unconventional, and completely sure of themselves. The silk scarf tucked in Min Seo's bag serves as reminder and promise. Some gifts aren't meant to be returned. Some help isn't meant to be repaid. And some meetings aren't accidents but interventions disguised as coincidence. Outside the airport, New York awaits with all its familiar energy and possibility. But inside their small family circle, they carry everything they need. Love multiplied rather than divided. Tradition enhanced rather than abandoned. And the quiet certainty that they chose correctly when they chose each other. The journey that began with tears at 35,000 feet has landed them exactly where they belong, together, stronger, and ready for whatever comes next. Have you ever wondered how one moment of vulnerability can reshape your entire life? Some cries for help are disguised as strength, and some strangers are actually the family you didn't know you needed. In a world that often tells us to choose between love and success, tradition and progress, personal happiness and social acceptance, perhaps the real answer is refusing to choose at all, building something bigger that honors both past and future, individual hearts and collective dreams. What family are you brave enough to choose?